Today, we continue dissecting the text adventure games based on the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. If you haven't seen my previous video about the Hobbit text adventure game, I strongly recommend you to watch it, since we will discuss its sequel, The Fellowship of the Ring, and there will be a bunch of comparisons. The link is in the description and YouTube cards. The critique will be based on the Commodore 64 version. Based on research, it seems to have the best quality of images, but the game itself is the same on all platforms. And of course, we will keep using my Stasocritic system to compartmentalize and score for fun different aspects of the game. Let's begin with design. The scores in this category have the biggest weight, 4, since design is pretty much the most important part of any game, even those that are focused on narrative. And on a high level, the Fellowship of the Ring, which is, called Fellowship of the Rings within the game. Nice to know that back in the day licensing checks were a bit more lax. Anyway, on a high level it tries to do the same thing as The Hobbit, a game where you create your own adventure within the living world, this time based on The Lord of the Rings. Only this attempt is more streamlined and focused than The Hobbit. You might remember that The Hobbit, while impressive from the technical perspective with its systemic approach, was often very random. Gandalf would steal inventory items from you and run away, Thorin would keep singing about gold, elves would capture goblins and throw them in their prisons, who from within captivity would capture you and throw into their goblin prison. It could get really messy. The Fellowship of the Ring, on the other hand, goes for a far more controlled approach. The Black Riders patrol the paved roads and search for the Ringbearer, and that's what they do. Strider keeps waiting for you in Bree, and only after you agree to join him will he go on his predefined path, which you still can affect should you ask him to. And unlike The Hobbit, this game tries to make sure you know what your goals are, even if you haven't read the book. In Bag End, you will have a note from Gandalf telling you need to go east to Rivendell, later there will be a letter informing that Strider can be trusted, and so on. This more streamlined approach can allow for a more consistent experience. The whole world is still open and interconnected, but there is a possibility to have a more clear understanding of what you need to do and how to affect the environment. And possibility is the key word here. Despite admirable high-level intentions, the Fellowship of the Ring fails on many levels. I should note right now that I haven't finished the game. After several hours of trying, I almost have reached the end of part 1 and watched part 2 on a video walkthrough to have an idea of what is going to happen there. With that in mind, I do believe my arguments still hold value. The first big problem comes from the fact that AI was oversimplified too much. When you start the game, you can choose to play as one of 4 hobbits. 3 of them start in Bag End, except for Merry, who starts in Creek Hollow. Now, had the game worked like The Hobbit, if you choose Merry and waited long enough, Frodo, Sam and Pippin would all reach you eventually. Now, of course, this isn't typical player behavior, but I did it for testing purposes. Nobody ever gets to you. I then went all the way to Bag End to their starting positions, opened the door, and as soon as I did, all 3 hobbits entered the screen to join me. It is then I realized that in this game, nobody can open doors. Of course, in The Hobbit it was annoyed when Gandalf would shut doors in front of your face, but it is still a pity when your fellow NPCs become so robotic in comparison. Now, it would have been fine if with this simplification of systems we would get more consistent systemic solutions to our problems. But there aren't any. For example, Black Riders move east and west on the road, so there is potential to time everything in such a way that you could sneak past them towards your goal. And by the way, time is turn-based in the Fellowship, so it is simpler to do that kind of stuff than in The Hobbit. Only at the very edge of the map leading to the ending of part 1, you still get 3 Black Riders blocking your way. And the only solution to that is to destroy them using elf stones and an incantation you learn from Radagast. And you need to have 3 elf stones, 1 for each rider. And the incantation, well, to get that you first need to find a monastery in Middle-earth? Okay, that will wait for the context section. Now, you do get a hint where it is located, and once you're there you meet a monk who asks you to prove yourself by fighting a green knight and resisting the seduction of a red lady? Okay, yeah, that's weird. The point is, while you do get hints for all these solutions, you need to complete a precise set of particular actions if you want any hope of beating the game. This is in stark contrast to The Hobbit, where you could kill Smaug with Gollum's dead body and get the treasure to finish the game that way. and even these limits would have been fine if the vocabulary and commands would be more flexible, but they can be even more restrictive than those from the Hobbit. For example, at the gates of Bree, to talk to the gatekeeper you can't knock on the gates, you need to knock on the hatch specifically. Once the gatekeeper opens the hatch, he asks for your name. If you say you're Frodo, he will call for the Black Riders. If you name yourself Underhill like in the books, he will let you in. Nobody in the game ever tells you of the name Underhill, so in case you haven't read the book, the game presents a clear third potential solution. It specifically mentions the wall can be climbed with a rope, and you get a rope at the very beginning in Bag End. So there is nothing wrong with this situation. Sure, there is a solution for which you need to know the book, but the game still provides a possibility to continue if you haven't read it, right? Well, I never figured out how to scale the wall. The game doesn't know the word scale, even though that is the specific action mentioned, and the hobbits keep failing to throw rope on top of the gate. Though maybe that last part is related to the game's stamina system and not the vocabulary. Every time a turn is taken, your stamina depletes a little, which you need to restore with food. Stamina affects how many things you can carry. For example, you may be too weak to pick up an item, but eat some food and voila, now you can take it. But outside of the cases where stamina is getting close to being depleted, you never have any idea how much you actually have. So it is possible that for the rope solution to work, you just need a lot of stamina, I don't know. The Fellowship of the Ring also has a lot of bugs. For example, I once told Sam to give the rope to me, and he did give the rope to an entity named you. An entity that doesn't exist if you try to examine it or find it, so he basically gave the rope to non-existent ether, losing it forever. I once wrote an attack command without specifying who to hit, and so I've hit myself, Sam hit me, Pippin hit me, and I died. And there are some outright sudden dead ends. Like if you get into a dark place without a light source, you can't leave from where you came, you can't do anything, you just have to load the previous save or restart if you didn't have one. The Hobbit was somewhat broken, but it was extremely open, inventive, and freeform. The Fellowship of the Ring sacrificed parts of those elements in the name of a more consistent experience, but in the end, it is still kinda broken. And that's sad because you can see how it all can work. With all that said, let's take a look at the possible scores for design. Out of all these, I will assign a 4. The direction is right, the potential is there, and you can literally feel how with some tweaking it can become a fine game, but it's not, and that's a shame. Now let's talk about context. This category is about everything that provides explanation and motivation to players' actions, characters, plot, world, etc. The weight is 1, as context is usually something that greatly enhances the experience but doesn't define it in its entirety. Like with The Hobbit, even though the game is based on a book, which also came alongside the game itself, we'll dissect this category only based on game-specific things, the manual and, well, the game itself. And to its credit, the Fellowship of the Ring does a much better job than The Hobbit to explain everything. The manual provides a brief but understandable history of the ring, how it was forged, why it is dangerous, how it got to Frodo, and what you have to do now or be aware of. It also has a little appendix section telling you about different locations, races, creatures. It is actually a solid way to provide you with the necessary information. Sure, it would be better to have all that in the game itself, but the Fellowship of the Ring is from 1985. We have to take into account how games get to use manuals for this kind of thing. Besides, as mentioned in the design section, the game itself doesn't shy away from making sure you have a clear understanding of what you have to do. More than that, you will get a pretty broad but understandable retelling of the book's story throughout the adventure. Yes, I didn't finish the game myself, but I did watch the rest of it on YouTube to make sure I could assess this properly. You have a council of Elrond where the Fellowship is formed, even a scene with Bilbo that shows the dangers of Ring's corruption, Gandalf falling in battle with the Balrog. You won't get the emotional connection, character arcs or thematic importance, sure, but you will learn the plot in broad strokes, and that's commendable. You also get a pretty condensed but solid enough look at Middle-earth geography. I was actually surprised to find myself at Mikel-Delvin and go as far west as Harlond or Fornost in the northern part, places that Tolkien fans might be excited to see. And the position of different screens is surprisingly accurate when compared with the actual map of Middle-earth. If you'd opened the book that came with the game that should have featured the map, you would get around relatively straightforward. If you're not familiar with the geography and don't look at any sources, then yes, you would have to learn it while playing. So the Fellowship of the Ring game does enough to provide a rundown of the book's plot and also a general understanding of the world structure. With all that in mind, there's a bunch of weird stuff that comes out of nowhere. The mayor of Mikkeldelving yells something about democratic process, the whole deal with the monk in the monastery and the 2 challenges he asked to complete, as was mentioned in the design section, is just weird and absolutely outside of Tolkien's lore by any stretch of imagination. And then at one point you stumble upon, not as a secret location mind you, but a mandatory place when you go towards the Barrow Downs, an orc heavy metal concert where the other hobbits start dancing. What? So with that taken into account, if we look at all the possible scores for context, I will assign a 4 to the Fellowship of the Ring. It does a good enough job to provide context, but also a number of weird things that just bring in confusion. In all fairness, I did laugh at the heavy metal concert part, but still. Now it's time to talk about aesthetics. This is another category with a weight of 1, being another aspect that is more about enhancing the experience rather than defining it. With the Fellowship of the Ring being a text adventure, a lot of aesthetic pleasure comes from text descriptions, which are nice and detailed enough to provide a very vivid image of where you are or what is happening. When it comes to dialogues, it depends, some are pretty elaborate, while other lines of talking can be very simplistic. Most of the screens in the game do come with pictures, although their quality pales a bit in comparison to the Hobbit's 1985 re-release drawings. The game also waits to fully load the picture before showing it. In the Hobbit, loading it on the spot created a nice effect of the image being drawn right in front of us. Here, this effect is absolutely missing, and instead we just wait on the text screen not being able to do anything. Because of this, it would actually be more comfortable to play without pictures. There is an option for that. There is no music at all or sound effects, so I can't comment much there. And I guess this is about it. So in the end, I will assign a 5 to aesthetics. The text descriptions are mostly nice, images are a bit hit and miss, but in general not too impressive anyway, and there's not much else. Time to talk about cohesion. This category is all about how well a game connects all its different aspects together to create a wholesome experience, and as such has a weight of 2. In this particular video we'll not spend much time discussing this category, I can even showcase all the scores right now and assign a 4. While the game is a relatively solid attempt at putting you into the world of Middle-earth, everything that we have mentioned before in all 3 categories, the limited vocabulary, specific weird actions that we have to do, context sometimes going off the rails, all that leads to an experience that at times can feel confusing and questionable. The next category is emotions. This is the most subjective category of Stasocritic. It is all about personal feelings, but yet it has the second biggest weight, 3, as these feelings matter greatly. Before playing the Fellowship of the Ring, I heard a lot about it being much worse than the Hobbit. And when I started, at first I couldn't really understand why. It seemed to be a huge improvement, for reasons we have discussed at the start of the design section. But what I felt at first were the intentions, which are solid. But the implementation of it all made me really frustrated. I got permanently stuck, killed myself due to a typo, got into positions from which there would have been no escape, had to bang against the wall to figure out what to do to complete specific actions, even as simple as knocking. So in the end, I will assign a 4 to emotions. The sad thing about all this is that while you play, you can literally feel all the ways this game could work fantastically, but it just doesn't. And unlike The Hobbit, it doesn't have a lot of redeeming points to make you wish to try again, despite all the flaws. After taking all the scores and their weights into account, the Fellowship of the Ring text adventure gets a final Stasocritic rating of 35. The Hobbit was an incredibly ambitious game, and even though it has failed on multiple levels, that ambition was so invigorating that you would still get enjoyment out of playing it. The Fellowship of the Ring lacks that ambition, and it doesn't have the quality that you would expect as a trade-off for that. It's not a bad game. In my Stasocritic system, the score of 30s doesn't mean that a title can't be recommended at all, but unless you are really prepared to deal with its problems, it will not bring you anything besides disappointment.